Hi everyone, thanks for logging on. We're going to take a few more minutes to allow others to join and then we'll get things started.
Well, greetings. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you to our 40th webinar in the Coffee with series hosted by the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership at Seton Hall University. I'm Reggie Lewis, Executive Director of the Greenleaf Center, and it is great to greet all of you who've logged on today to take part in our conversation with the Reverend Dr. Stephanie Bush Mann, a servant leader whose mark on the world will be felt for generations to come. I'll give a more formal intro to the Reverend Dr. Bush Mann in a minute, but first, a word about our webinar series and the center. The Coffee with series provides the chance to showcase the inspirational stories of servant leaders and the endless ways in which individuals, organizations, and society in general can be transformed by the power of servant leadership, a philosophy in which the leader first seeks to serve. For over 60 years, the Greenleaf Center has worked to promote the awareness, understanding, and practice of servant leadership. In addition to the Coffee with series, other core programs include the Greenleaf Scholars Program, which funds research on the efficacy and impact of servant leadership, a virtual course designed to provide professionals with the fundamentals of servant leadership practices that are useful within any sector. We also expose high school and college students to opportunities to develop lives of service through our Next Generation initiative. And through our outside engagements, we proudly work closely with organizational partners as they seek to foster optimal growth in employees and nurture vibrant teams to achieve greater impact. Before a proper introduction of our guests, I'd be remiss in not acknowledging the generous sponsor of the Greenleaf Center's 2026 Coffee with Webinar series, the Terrell Fund. The Terrell Fund is a foundation that serves children and families in New Jersey and Vermont. The fund works collaboratively across sectors to make an impact in such issue areas as early childhood, K-12 education, arts, family support, and more. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our friends at the Terrell Fund. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. It is truly an honor to welcome today's guest and my dear friend, the Reverend Dr. Stephanie Bush Mann, an ordained Unity minister, attorney, educator, mediator, and spiritual leader whose work bridges law, criminal justice, public service, and transformative spirituality. She holds a Juris Doctor and a PhD in criminal justice, is a licensed Unity teacher, a certified life and professional coach, and is certified in prison ministry. A former elected New Jersey state legislator and gubernatorial cabinet member, she has also served as a senior researcher with the National Council on Crime and Delinquency, as well as a professor, city administrator, and author. Reverend Dr. Bushman brings extensive experience in correctional settings, including facilitating programs and leading trauma-informed workshops that support healing, accountability, and personal transformation among incarcerated individuals. She's the founder and spiritual leader of the Spiritual Cafe of the South Jersey Shore, Unity and Sojourn Institute, LLC, and serves as co-program director of the Prison Ministry Certification Program at Unity Urban Ministerial School, where she equips others for compassionate, transformative service in correctional settings and beyond. Welcome, the Reverend Dr. Bush Mann. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, and thank you for this opportunity to have conversation.
And a conversation we will have. I want to also let our audience know that you too will have the opportunity to raise questions with our distinguished guests. So you can think about loading up some of your questions through our Zoom Q&A feature. But let's start. And also to our audience, I have permission to refer to our guest as Stephanie. I don't want to be irreverent to some. She, after all, is from my hometown. And so we'll begin with formative years and career milestones, Stephanie. We know that you grew up in the great city of East Orange, New Jersey. What are your fondest memories of childhood?
Wow, I've thought about that over the days, and the first thing that comes to me is the sense of community that growing up, my first 5 years of life, I lived on South Burnett Street, which
Mhm.
ironically later, years later, I would buy and have my law office on that street. But then I was on Madonna Place for the remainder of the time, and my parents were for many, many decades. And then later on Ellington Street, when I came back after law school and bought my own home. And in all of those situations, I recall community among neighbors and even the far-reaching community, even though what East Orange is like 3.5 square miles,
That's right,
and
3.9 square miles. That's
3.9, it must have grown a little bit.
right.
But just that sense of, even the hello and knowing people, knowing the political figures, but
Yes.
seeing them just as people. So
Mhm.
really that sense of community, really.
Ah, that's wonderful. A rich sense of community. And you knew your leaders because many of them actually lived right in the neighborhoods with you.
Absolutely.
So
And
they were accessible.
made their presence known and not just around election day, but
Correct.
you would see them just regularly. Church,
Absolutely.
activities, all of that. Store,
Abs-
you
That's
know.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Right at the supermarket where you might file that complaint. Right. Um, East Orange High School,
Yeah.
uh, Cornell, American University School of Law, Rutgers for a PhD, all very, very impressive. But take us back to those early days of East Orange. What did young Stephanie imagine herself becoming?
It's interesting because it changed over time. So probably when I was about 5 to 8 years old, I was going to be a teacher.
Okay.
Ironically, that shows up now. And I remember in one of the little rooms in our home, I would have the blackboard, the dog, and the invisible class. And I would walk the invisible class to Elmwood Library.
Okay.
So that was that. And then as I was volunteering as a candy striper at
Hmm.
Orange Memorial Hospital and East Orange General Hospital, I had thought that I wanted to be a physical therapist
Okay.
and then also a mathematician and
Hmm.
such. And so, but then when I got to Cornell, I decided psychology
Hmm.
as I earned my bachelor's and saw that as a master's, I'd have to go into the heads of cats. I said, no way. And so I happened to just sign up for the LSAT after visiting a prison for one of my courses and ended up in law school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And we're all the better for these shifts, which takes us to our next category of public trust and government responsiveness. A Pew Research Center survey found that 83% of Americans, 83%, say they trust the federal government only some of the time or never. Stephanie, what do you believe are the primary causes of this disconnect between citizens and government?
Well, I think if we're speaking specifically about federal government, there tends to be a distance between the people in the community and the actual structures and the people who work within government and federal government. And so much of that means that we get our information about what's happening at that level from the media, which in
Hmm.
my time, I've seen a big shift from just reporting the news or the facts and you formulate your own opinion to it being more about sensationalism in
Hmm.
order to get you in almost like a television show.
Hmm.
Um, Now, in some federal districts, there will be more of a presence of elected officials. You know, I can remember when I lived in the northern part of New Jersey, and the congressmen and senators and all, I would see them and they would be present. I will say that living in the southern part of New Jersey, that's not what I see, you know. And so I believe it is that feeling of distance and therefore the intervention of others who are actually interpreting what's being done and what the meaning is and the lack of connection.
Uh, Distance matters, connectivity obviously matters. Let's build on that a bit. When people say government isn't working for people like me, what do you think they're really expressing, and how should public leaders respond to that sentiment? And building on your prior point, how do you create greater authentic connectivity in times like these?
Yeah. We're in interesting times now. And so even if this question had been posed to me a decade ago or more, it would have been about people getting out and building bridges, which we still need to do, but there's a greater divide now. And so it requires more intentionality, more action on both sides, because I've always felt, continue to feel, that we, the people, are government and that government should be responsible to all of us. However, I can't sit on my laurels and not
So, so
go
you're breaking up just a
to
little
my
bit, Stephanie. Stephanie, you're breaking up just a
legislator
little bit.
or communicate involved in terms of knowing what is going on. Even when I made sure the thing is happened in the news. Can you hear me? Am I
You're
okay
you're
now?
breaking up just a little bit. So you're
Oh, okay. Um, I'm still breaking up.
okay. Now you're better. Yes.
So, okay, now I'm better. I was silent then, but I'm better. I'm trying to even
Yes,
see
you
if
are.
there's, yeah. Okay. So I'm just saying that there's a responsibility as the constituent, as well as elected officials, to participate and make those connections. And that particularly in this times when there's so much division, to also, as best we can, to drop the emotional aspect so we can hear each other and
Huh.
so we can listen.
Wow. Let's take that down to, I think about Tip O'Neill saying about all politics is local. Local government and community impact as our next category. And you and I know this personally from our roles at the local level as former administrators that many residents only interact with government when they're paying their taxes, maybe handling minor requests like securing a permit, or unfortunately during a crisis. Um, how can local governments in particular leverage these interactions as opportunities to deepen relationships, build greater trust, and enhance responsiveness? Because to your first point, there's less distance, so we can't blame it on distance on the local scene for the most part.
Mhm, mhm. Well, I think one of the first things is customer service, and that therefore we need to have the right people at the desk, even
Yes,
collecting the taxes, answering questions, providing information as you may come into City Hall to pay your taxes. So a sense of welcoming and attention. And also people want to be heard. And so it means we have to respect on both sides. But in addition to respect, we have to listen and we have to release our own preconceived ideas of who's talking to us. We know what they want to say, or I disagree with them, or they're attacking me, and and really begin to listen, um, and also to respond in a short period of time. So if someone calls you and leaves a message or sends a letter, acknowledge it, even if you have to say, "I will get back to you." But when people call or leave messages or they enter into a facility and they don't feel welcome, they don't feel heard, it really destroys any possibility of those connections and relationships that you can then build upon, you know, build upon. Mhm.
absolutely, absolutely. And it could create the kind of alienating experience in which people just don't return. And so you can there's a risk of losing people forever. You're also speaking to some basic, tenets of servant leadership, right? So if we're not listening to understand so that we can respond appropriately, then it's another lost moment. Um, I want to take this now to the state level, where you've also done some amazing things. And so our category for our audience is state government and systems change. Um, you became, Stephanie, the first African American woman to serve in a New Jersey governor's cabinet, with Governor James Florio appointing you as the commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs in 1992. Before I get into the heart of the question, though, we have some people on who are not from New Jersey. Would you tell our guests who are not from our Garden State what the responsibility of the Department of Community Affairs entails?
Well, sometimes the divisions change, but basically it was about helping to empower communities throughout New Jersey, which at that point it was 567. So that meant I oversaw the divisions and such of housing and aging, of community development, a full span. I sat as the chair of the New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency, even though they were in but not of. So really, so many of the resources that would be made should be made available as tools for which the communities and municipalities and counties could actually be able to use and empower themselves and their constituency to move forward. So it was an excellent opportunity.
And mind-boggling as people listen to that number 567, which I think now is like 566. But the craziness of New Jersey in that we have more towns and municipalities per capita than anybody in America. And so as the DCA commissioner, you had to deal with urban, suburban, rural New Jersey, how did you sort of recalibrate your department, which was known and still sometimes unfortunately is known as quite bureaucratic, to become more responsive to the varied needs of these municipalities across the state of New Jersey?
Yeah, yeah. And even though, let me just say, even though there's 567 or 566, it's amazing how each one has its own characteristics and
Yes.
personality. It's like you can go right across the line. So that's why when you hear about merging, there's big fights,
Yes.
but you can really tell. So what I did, even when I first came in, I was coming in from the state legislature. So I had been working in a district that was both urban and suburban. Um, but I found it was necessary to truly listen to the people who worked in the Department of Community Affairs, like all of them, not just going through the bureaucracy that before I got there, at least it was represented to me, and I could tell as I was changing things, it was a little pushback that if I wanted to get information or talk about a project or an idea, I would not just invite the deputy commissioner or the assistant commissioners. I would invite various people from each of the divisions, people who had never been at the commissioner's table to come
Wow.
in and let's talk. And I could tell that some feathers were ruffled because I'm this, and you're not supposed to. I'm supposed to tell them. But I always realized, it's one of those things. I could tell you something, Reggie, and then you could go and tell Gabby something, and then she could tell him by the time it comes back, it's all different.
That's
And
right.
I found what better way than to have everyone at the table to share their thoughts, their perspectives, their ideas, their visions. And after a while, people began to appreciate this and at least not demonstrate being so offended by it. And I also modeled that if someone called me as the commissioner, whether they were inside or outside, I would get back to them within 24 hours and they would be surprised. But that I therefore had that expectation of everyone who worked. At that point, I think it was 1,040 employees. And I know there's sometimes things that happen and you can't do it, but that should be the normal protocol as opposed to no calls being returned or you feel you can't reach out because you're too high up in
Yes.
rank. Yeah.
Too many layers. Respect the hierarchy. Clearly, you chiseled away at that, which is easier said than obviously done,
Oh
because there
yeah.
was some pushback. So, how did you deal? I know this isn't part of the scripted questions, but how did you deal with the resistance, though? Because inevitably, you're there as a servant leader. You're trying to open up the commissioner's office to make it more responsive to every team member, whether they're at the receptionist level to a field staff level to a deputy commissioner level. And yet, that pulls people out of their comfort zone. So for the practitioners out there, how did you handle the resistance?
Yeah. And it's the three B's. With
Yes,
many of them, be here before you
that's
got
right.
here, be here while you're here, and be
That's
here
right.
when you're
When you
gone.
leave.
And so they're just sort of waiting me out.
Yes.
But because I guess I had been raised to stand up for what I believe and not afraid to be the only one doing it. And then here I'm coming in as the commissioner. I would listen to the objections and think about if I felt there was something that was valid that I should take into account. But then I would just say, if I'm doing it, I expect you to do it. And this is how it is. So I believe in leadership. And in many places I've been, I can say people have a voice. But at some point, it may need to be clear it's not always a democracy, that
Hmm.
I will listen to you, I will work with you, provide the tools you need to succeed, what we need to succeed. But when a final decision needs to be made as the leader, I have to make it because also the buck will stop with me. If things go wonderfully, this whole family gets the credit. If things go awry, I'm not going to turn around and say, oh, they told me this. It's going to be me who will take it and such. And I feel that that was my responsibility as a leader. So to model it and to also make it clear what was expected and for everybody. And that's important too, because
Always important. But also, as I'm listening to your insights, being a
If
servant leader
you
doesn't mean you
let
forget about. I'm
one
sorry.
person not do it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a break in the middle of that, just a tiny bit. Um, I was just building and amplifying on your point
Yeah.
that being a servant leader does not mean that you are unable to make a decision, and that you sort of throw accountability, out the window. So because that is a misperception with, servant leadership, so mushy and that so much sort of reaching out that we never make a decision, and you model just the opposite.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think you make better decisions because you have more input from different perspectives. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, our last category is entitled Application of Servant Leadership in the Public Domain. And as Robert Greenleaf, the founder of the modern movement of servant leadership, reminds us in his writings that one with a title or positional authority in government does not, equate to that person being a servant leader. So you can have the title, we can even have the power, but it doesn't make you a servant leader. But we're in 2026, and you could say the same was happening in 1992. The reality of the seductive nature of power is not likely to ever change. So you mentioned the responsibility of the voters earlier, right? So how do voters best discern the quality of candidates most appropriately suited for public office? And especially, again, you've already alluded to it, we're inundated, we're bombarded with lots of information, lots of things coming through social media, um, of a sensationalized nature. So how do people think more analytically, in order to make better decisions to ultimately choose better people to sit in seats that you've once held?
Yeah, I don't think there's any one formula, unfortunately. Um, but I do think there are a few things. The number one, to not allow our common sense to go out of the window when we're evaluating people. Um, and so look at who they've been,
Mm,
what they've done, not just what's on bumper stickers and slogans, but really doing your own, as well as you can, research of who is this person? How have they lived? What have they done before they said, I want to be your elected official? And and there will be times when you will be surprised, because they may get in and totally changed. I've seen that happen where people go and they say, this is what I'm going to do. And then all of a sudden they switch and they go opposite way. Um, but I think that by doing, and that may have been a benefit in the past, and particularly with local government, because you tend to know people and
mm,
somebody knows someone who knew someone. And so you can get an idea as to the quality of their character and integrity. At the federal level, you have to do your research, and as much as we may or may not like it, to Google, not take everything you find on the internet as true, but it's like looking at the news, that there's something that's happening, and what other research can I do to really determine what's their position on different issues, but how much can I trust that they will do? And then you have to realize too that when people are elected, it's different than when you're running for office because you're in
yes.
an entirely different system. And there's oftentimes things as an elected official that you didn't even know you'd have to do with compromise,
Mm,
that once you get into this arena, you do. But I always felt, even as an elected state legislator, I never would compromise my true beliefs, ethics, and integrity. Because once I left, I wanted to still have all of that intact. And I didn't want the FBI knocking on my door at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's how I continued to live. So it's really doing the research you can, but believe people when they say, you know, to check them out. And if they say they're like strange, believe them as being strange. If they say they're perfect, don't believe it and do more research.
doing the due diligence matters, and also just taking the notion of deciding on who should represent us, the people,
Mhm.
taking that more seriously.
And just to
Um,
add, and not to stop there, that once they get elected, to stay involved,
yeah,
to find out what's their voting record, what's their reason for it, make appointments with the local office, go in and speak. When they're having town halls or they're sending out
yeah,
newsletters, continue to educate yourself about whom you've chosen, or maybe you didn't choose them and you'll change your mind now.
absolutely. So I'm getting nudged by some of the young people in this office that I'm hogging up all the time with our distinguished guests. I've got one last question I'm now being permitted to ask. And it has to do about with respect to this period of intense polarization and divisiveness along partisan ideological lines that we're living in. What do you say, Reverend Doctor, about the way forward? And is there anything that gives you hope in that regard?
Yeah, it's been interesting times, times that I never thought would see or see again.
Mm,
But I think it has, like, as with so much in life and statistics, we know what goes up comes down, and then it tends to come to the middle. And oftentimes it is necessary to have this sort of chaos for people to not be at just a comfort level of all is well, but to know that they too have a part and must take action. And that action begins, I believe, with first checking yourself out. What do I truly believe? How am I showing up? How am I informed? Have I voted? Have I not voted? What can I do? And what are my values and what are important? And what is mine to do and to get out there and do it?
mm, absolutely. Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Stephanie Bush Mann. We're not done yet. We're going to move into our Q&A portion, which will be handled by Gabby Cooper, our Senior Project Manager. Gabby.
Thank you, Reggie, and thank you, Reverend Dr. Stephanie Bushman, for being here with us today. So, our first question is, what are some examples you've seen of government agencies genuinely listening to citizens and adopting their policies and services based on community feedback?
Hmm, good question.
Mhm.
Um, I have seen, in addition to some of my professional experiences, I've been a city administrator.
Mhm.
And so I have seen where there have been town hall meetings that have been convened by a few of the mayors, and that there would be suggestions that were given by the community. So like even things like the hours of service or the ability to have customer service better and where it was incorporated or activities that may even be in recreation and such. When I was a state legislator, and we were looking at issues of even family leave law, and
Mhm.
it was being vetoed by the then president at the national level, federal level, and I sponsored it at the state level. But listening to people about needing time off and being able then to incorporate it in what became the first family leave law in the nation, and then a few years later. At the federal level, they looked, New Jersey had not fallen into the ocean, and so we now have it at the federal level. But really getting those ideas from people.
Yeah, it has to come from the people. Does
Yeah.
that, yeah. Okay, so our next question is, in an era of increasing political polarization, how can federal institutions rebuild confidence among citizens who feel unheard or disconnected from decision makers at the highest level?
Well, I think that the agencies are made up of people
Mhm.
and they're made up of leadership within those agencies. So it is not within every person's toolbox to be able to be open and communicating. It's sort of like Reggie was saying, sometimes people get a
Mhm.
title and they get stuck in that title and they're not really looking to hear other people tell them what to do. So
Mhm.
sometimes it very well means that you have to change the leadership so that the culture of the agency will be more receptive and open and go out and have different avenues for which the public can participate in policymaking.
Yeah, definitely. The culture and the tone of the setting comes from the top.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so tell us a bit about your prison ministry work. How did you get into that work and what have you learned?
Wow, it's amazing. When I look back at my path of life, I realize I was preparing myself, unbeknownst to me, for doing this. So, the
Mm,
first time I went into prison, I was at Cornell University as an undergraduate and went into Elmira Correctional Facility for one of the courses I was having. And I remember my knees gave way as they closed the bars up because you go
mm,
into there. And then
mm,
just during the practice of law, some of my practice was in criminal law. When I was a legislator, I was the vice chair of the Criminal Disposition Commission for New Jersey, and then went on for the doctorate and just all of that. But as I decided to get into the ministry, they began to offer a program, a certification program along the way in prison ministry. And I said, oh, I'll do this. And so in doing it, I was reacquainted. Some of the things we had to do was to reach out to people or programs, and I was reacquainted with people I knew in the state and
mm,
who were working in it. And they were saying, when you finish, you need to come in. And so I actually went in, applied also for a grant, and received it. And so now it's sharing the tools that I share with other people, but sharing the tools that others may choose to use if they want, that I say to empower themselves to create their best lives. And I just find it as my passion and my purpose. I go
mm,
into two New Jersey state prisons, women's prison and one of the men's prisons, and working right there inside and with the people, and can see the transformation when they're
mm.
beginning to realize that they too have the power within themselves.
Wow. So, what are some of the needs that you're seeing among these populations in the prison, and how can leaders work to address these needs?
I am seeing, first of all, well, it's on many, many different levels.
Hmm.
First of all, if we're talking about helping the people who are involved in the justice system in there, it's number one, there can be the sense of this is who I am, I'm a criminal and whatever. What I have so appreciated is for many of them coming to me and saying, we appreciate that you see us as a person and not a bad person. And so they need to know they have the power within themselves, just as we all do, to change what we're doing, how we're doing it, and believe in the voice we're hearing from within as opposed to all of the chatter outside, and then to do what we need to do. We need to also help them with that transition from going from being incarcerated to coming out. I work with
Hmm.
them to be ready from the inside, but when you first get out, where am I going to sleep tonight? Where am I going to sleep the next night? So there can be programs, but oftentimes there's a disappointment because we always think it's going to be great once I get out, but the world has continued on, families have continued on, so the connection. So I think all of us can do things, even like programs of how to keep them connected with their children. That's one of the biggest things I hear is that concern that the children are growing up, but they're separate and apart. And the children will most likely be mad at them when they come out. It's just going to be natural.
Hmm.
So there's so many things that I can't say this quickly, but I would love if anybody wanted to get in touch with me and they come through you and I can give you an email and all, but would be very happy to share even more. But it's great, rewarding work at
Yeah.
different levels.
Definitely needed work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I heard you touch on technology and social media with Reggie before. So, technology offers new opportunities for citizen engagement, but it can also create new barriers.
Mhm.
How should governments at all levels use technology to better understand and respond to public needs while maintaining human connection?
Yeah, I think it is one tool, but should not be the only tool.
Hmm.
Because even with us as individuals, we each learn differently, we each act in different ways. So for me, technology is great. And it allows me to do things I probably otherwise wouldn't do because of distance and time and things for certain things. But I think that with government, it's great to have technology, great to have it where people can pay those taxes online or to even
Mhm.
get information with videos online, but to still have personal connection for those who need that only or who also need that in addition to. So having community events and not always when it's just a problem. So I love, seeing municipalities having activities in the park just for a community gathering, doing little things like on the weekend where you may have paper shredding, once every 3 months. So it
Mhm.
helps both the environment and trash collection, but people feel like, oh, my town cares, and so have shredding. So I think it becomes one important tool, but should not be the only way of interaction as well as providing information.
Yeah, there needs to be that balance because there are people who really don't have technology, whether that's by choice or not by choice. There is
Right,
still people who like don't have access to internet at all. And
right, right.
so
Yeah.
how would you say governments keep in contact with those people who can't get cell service or internet service where they're living?
Well, I think then that's when we have to go back by regular mail, you know.
Hmm.
We can't forget what we also have just because we begin to have additional tools.
Yes.
Regular mail, even some of the phone call systems, that where, it's a call that comes in if people will pick up, but if not, it'll, can leave a message about how, this is your mayor or this is your council person
Mhm.
or this is public works and we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing that. Having community meetings in the various, wards or however the district is set up, having council meetings that are both in person and online. And then also having ambassadors who go out and share the information.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay, so our last question for today is we are on a college campus here at Seton Hall, and graduation season has just passed. So, what advice would you give to young people looking to pursue a career in public service?
I would say ask yourself why I want to do this.
Mhm.
And then, really, what I found in everything I did, I would begin to write in my journal, what do I like or what would I like in a profession? And then
Mhm.
also, what would I not particularly like? And then I found things opened up. I never planned to go to law school. I just got mad when I went to the prison because we were
Mhm.
asked to do something, ended up it wasn't the law. So I sat cold. When I was in as a legislator and I began to get the feeling of wanting to move on, I had written down just like that what I liked and didn't. And just by chance, if we believe in that, Governor Flory asked me to
Mhm.
come in his office and said, will you be the commissioner? So I
Mhm.
say, know thyself. So really take the time to write down what I want and what it is, and then to volunteer in different places to
Mhm.
get a feeling. I mean, in summer jobs, go. So if you can get a summer job, like in a municipality, I worked at the East Orange Alcohol and Drug Abuse Program. I worked at the recreation department at the swimming pool. That was the best job of my life, you know. But doing that. So see how you can either get a job, an internship, or even volunteer to and don't be so confined in this is what I want to be. Let the universe unfold and you'll be surprised the opportunities
Yeah.
that come your way you never imagined.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so, so much for being here with us today. This has been a treat.
Oh, my great pleasure. My great pleasure. Thank you.
Indeed, it has been a treat to have you, the Reverend Dr. Bush Mann. Thank you for making time for us today. We confirm here at the center that all 566 municipalities in New Jersey are all better off because of all the ways in which you served our state, and we're grateful. And we hope you'll come back.
Well, just let me know when.
All right. I do have a few brief announcements about the center. So earlier this month, the center hosted Nicholas Enrich. He's a New York Times bestselling author who wrote the book Into the Wood Chipper. So the recording on this webinar is now available on our YouTube channel, which you can find linked to our homepage at greenleaf.org. The Greenleaf Center is excited to announce the 2026 Hall of Fame inductees. This award recognizes individuals and organizations who have left an impact on those communities. So if you would like to meet the honorees, become a sponsor, purchase an ad, or reserve your ticket, you could go to greenleaf.org where all that information is linked on our homepage. If you would like to stay connected with the Greenleaf Center and be informed about when our next webinars are and the updates on the Hall of Fame event, you can follow us on these three platforms. And lastly, thank you to those who logged on today to take part and listen. If you could please complete the Zoom survey that will pop up in your browser after, we would greatly appreciate it. So thank you all who joined, and thank you, Reverend, for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Take care,
Take care.
Stephanie.
Okay.